All right, get ready, because today we're going deep, really deep into Genesis.
Oh, yeah.
That foundational text, I mean, we're talking for Judaism,
Yeah.
Christianity, and Islam. It's more than just the first book of the Bible. It's origin stories,
Absolutely.
dramatic twists, these timeless themes, the kind of stuff that still resonates even today, right?
Absolutely. And it's this wellspring of philosophical questions and moral lessons. You know, it's really shaped Western thought for millennia.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking creation, humanity's first steps,
Yeah.
and the consequences of their choices.
That's hairy stuff.
It's weighty stuff, even for those already familiar with the text.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Chapter 1 sets the stage with God creating the heavens and the earth in 6 days. What always gets me is the order and intentionality of it all. Each element carefully placed with that repeated refrain, and God saw that it was good.
Yeah.
It's not just random chaos.
No.
There's a plan, a purpose woven into the very fabric of creation.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And that rhythm of creation, work, and rest, culminating in the Sabbath on the seventh day, it's a concept that really transcends religious boundaries. You, as someone familiar with Genesis, know its importance in Jewish law. But have you considered its social impact? A day of rest, mandated, irrespective of status. It challenged ancient power structures, didn't it? A concept radical even today.
Absolutely. Now, chapter 2 zooms in on this paradise God created, the Garden of Eden.
Yes.
Adam and Eve, living the dream, harmony with God, with nature, at least until things take a turn.
Right. This is where we encounter the creation of Eve from Adam's rib.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just an anatomical detail.
Yeah.
It speaks to a profound interconnectedness between man and woman.
Yeah.
Not one being superior,
Right.
but both originating from the same source. And then, of course, we have that infamous tree of knowledge of good and evil with God's explicit warning. Hands off, guys.
Yeah, don't touch that.
But we all know how curiosity goes.
In chapter 3, things go south. Enter the serpent, the ultimate smooth talker.
Yes.
Whispering promises of knowledge and godlike power to Eve.
Yeah.
It's like those irresistible online ads that promise you'll be a millionaire if you just click here.
Yes.
The allure of easy knowledge. It's timeless, isn't it?
It is.
And Eve, well, she takes a bite. Literally. And then Adam follows suit. Suddenly, they're aware of their nakedness, feeling shame.
Yeah.
And guess who decides to drop by?
Not the best timing for a divine visit.
Not a good time.
This is the classic fall from grace narrative,
Yeah.
and the consequences are swift. The serpent is cursed. Adam and Eve are expelled from paradise.
Wow.
And pain and toil become part of the human experience. But it's not just about punishment, is it? It's about choice.
Free will.
Free will and the consequences that stem from our actions.
Okay. Things get even more intense in chapter 4. We meet Adam and Eve's sons,
Yeah.
Cain and Abel.
Right.
Cain, the farmer, offers God a sacrifice from his crops. Abel, the shepherd, offers the firstborn of his flock.
Right.
God seems to favor Abel's offering.
Yes.
And Cain, well, let's just say he doesn't take it well.
No, he doesn't.
Cain and Abel's story compels us to look inward. I mean, what fuels those feelings of inadequacy in us? Is it inherent, or does society even today play a role? And how do we, unlike Cain, process these emotions constructively?
Yeah, it's a stark portrayal of jealousy and rage leading to the first murder in human history.
Right.
What's haunting is God's question to Cain.
Where is your brother?
Where is Abel, your brother? It's a question that still echoes today, challenging us to take responsibility for our actions and consider the well-being of others.
A potent reminder, for sure. Chapter 5 shifts gears a bit. It's like a genealogical record, tracing the lineage from Adam to Noah. X lived Y years and begat Z. It's a recurring theme, highlighting the continuity of generations.
Yes.
But there's this intriguing figure,
Yeah.
Enoch. He walked with God and then was simply taken.
Right.
Almost like a divine mystery tucked into this family tree.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition, isn't it? This meticulous record of births and deaths.
Right.
And then this enigmatic account of Enoch's departure. It raises questions about the nature of faith, the mystery of the divine, and the different ways humans can connect with the transcendent.
Then we hit chapter 6 through 9, and things get really biblical with a capital B. Humanity's wickedness is rampant, and God decides it's time for a reset, a global flood to wipe the slate clean. Enter Noah, the righteous man chosen to build an ark, becoming a household name for his boat-building skills, and ultimately saving both humanity and the animal kingdom.
The flood narrative is a powerful depiction of judgment and mercy. God's wrath is evident.
Absolutely.
But there's also this saving grace extended to Noah and his family, a continuation of life itself.
Yeah.
Then there's that covenant, symbolized by the rainbow,
Right.
a promise of no more floods. But what about other calamities? Is this covenant limited to natural disasters, or does it hint at a broader divine responsibility?
Interesting question. So the flood subsides, a new era begins,
Yeah.
and chapter 10 offers a table of nations outlining the descendants of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It's from them that the nations of the world are said to have sprung.
This chapter is fascinating from a historical and anthropological perspective. It attempts to explain the diversity of cultures and languages, tracing them back to a common origin.
Right.
It also introduces us to Nimrod, a mighty hunter who establishes a kingdom in Babel, a name we'll encounter again soon.
Got it. And in chapter 11, we arrive at one of the most famous stories in Genesis,
Yeah.
the Tower of Babel. Humanity, unified by a single language, decides to build a tower so high it reaches heaven,
Yeah.
a monument to their ingenuity and ambition. Let's just say God isn't impressed.
God sees this as pure hubris and decides to intervene,
Yeah.
confounding their language
Watch
and
here.
creating a cacophony of tongues.
Wow.
This scattering of people across the earth speaks to the dangers of pride, the limits of human ambition, and perhaps even a divine nod to the beauty of diversity.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? This drive to build higher, to achieve global unity, sometimes at the cost of local cultures.
Yeah.
It's a dilemma we still grapple with, this tension between globalization and the preservation of unique identities.
Absolutely. And the story's explanation for the origin of different languages.
Yeah.
It suggests that our differences, our inability to always understand each other, aren't necessarily a curse, but perhaps a necessary ingredient for a more vibrant world.
So we've covered a lot of ground, from creation to the scattering of nations. Genesis isn't just some ancient text. It's a wellspring of stories that continue to resonate today. But before we move on, I want to highlight something we see repeatedly in these chapters.
Okay.
God's clear intention in creation.
That's a crucial point.
Remember Genesis 1.31?
Yes.
God saw all that he had made, and it was very good.
Yes.
That emphasis on very good isn't accidental. It suggests a meticulous plan, a deliberate act of creation. And that sets the stage for the next part of our discussion, doesn't it? We've seen the creation, but now let's explore humanity's purpose. Genesis 2.15 hints at it. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it.
Yes.
What kind of work are we meant for?
That's a great question, and one that's resonated throughout history. And as we delve deeper into Genesis, we see different facets of that work, from tending the garden to navigating relationships,
Yeah.
from grappling with temptation
Right.
to facing the consequences of our choices.
It's fascinating how these early chapters lay out these fundamental patterns of human experience that we still grapple with today.
Right.
We've got creation, paradise, temptation, the fall. It's all there in the first few pages.
It's like a blueprint for the human drama. And one of the most compelling aspects of this drama is the relationships that unfold, starting with Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
They're not just characters in a story, they embody this fundamental paradox of human nature. Created in God's image, representing purity and innocence, yet capable of disobedience and experiencing shame.
Yeah.
Their story isn't just a historical event, it's an allegory for the human condition, the struggle between our desires and our conscience.
And their relationship sets the stage for all that follows, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's the first one we encounter in the Bible. This template for love, partnership, and let's be honest, a fair bit of tension. I mean, you see this beautiful depiction of Eve's creation from Adam's rib, signifying their connection, their equality.
Right.
But then comes the fall, the blame, the shifting of responsibility.
Exactly. It raises questions that we still grapple with. How do we navigate relationships, especially when faced with difficult choices? How do we share responsibility, own our mistakes, and move forward together?
Right. And then there's Cain and Abel, another relationship fraught with conflict. It's not just sibling rivalry. It's a stark exploration of jealousy, rage, and the destructive power of envy.
Yeah.
Cain, consumed by his resentment, commits the ultimate act of violence against his own brother.
And God's response, that question, where is Abel, your brother,
Right.
is chilling. It's not just about accountability. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, our responsibility for one another.
Right.
That question still echoes today,
It does.
challenging us to consider the impact of our actions, not just on ourselves, but on those around us.
Then we have Noah, often portrayed as this almost superheroic figure, single-handedly building this massive ark, saving humanity and the animal kingdom. He's a symbol of faith and obedience, a man who trusts God's plan even when it seems utterly impossible.
But he's also human, flawed. We see this after the flood when he plants a vineyard, gets drunk, and exposes himself. It's a reminder that even those who seem larger than life, even those who have achieved great things, are susceptible to human weakness.
It's a good reminder that we all have our moments, right? Nobody's perfect, not even the guy who just saved the world from a giant flood.
It's a message of grace and understanding. It encourages us not to put people on pedestals, but to recognize our shared humanity, our shared struggles. And that, I think, is a valuable lesson for us today, especially in a world that often feels quick to judge and condemn.
Speaking of lessons, we've touched on some already. Creation and order, humanity's potential and fall, consequences and redemption, the power of story. But these aren't just abstract concepts.
Right.
They offer practical insights for how we live our lives today.
Absolutely. Take the idea of creation and order,
Okay.
for example. It's not just about God creating the universe. It's about the creative potential within each of us, the ability to shape our lives, our communities,
Yeah.
even the world around us.
So it's about taking that divine spark of creation and using it to make a positive impact. It's about being intentional with our actions, our choices, our creations.
Exactly.
What about humanity's potential and fall? How does that play out in our current world?
We see it everywhere in the choices we make, the systems we create, the ways we treat each other and the planet.
Yeah.
We have this incredible capacity for love, compassion, innovation,
Right.
yet we're also capable of immense selfishness, greed, and destruction. Genesis reminds us that the potential for both good and evil resides within us. The question is, which will we choose to nurture?
It's a daily challenge, isn't it? To rise above those baser instincts, to strive for something better.
It is.
And what about consequences and redemption? Those themes feel especially potent in a world grappling with climate change, social injustice, political divisions. It's easy to feel overwhelmed,
Right.
like we're drowning in a sea of problems.
It is overwhelming, and Genesis doesn't offer easy answers.
No.
But it does remind us that even in the face of catastrophe, even after the most devastating flood, there's always hope for renewal.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the consequences of our actions, both individually and collectively, but also holding on to that belief in redemption, in our ability to learn, grow, and create a better future.
It's about becoming the rainbow, so to speak, a symbol of hope and reconciliation after the storm.
I like that.
And speaking of stories, Genesis isn't just a collection of facts or moral codes. It's a tapestry of narratives that speak to the depths of human experience.
It is.
How can we harness the power of story, as embodied in Genesis, to help us navigate these complex times?
Stories have this unique ability to connect us, to transcend differences,
Right.
to help us make sense of the world around us.
Right.
Genesis, with its rich tapestry of characters, conflicts, and moral dilemmas, offers a framework for understanding our own lives, our own struggles.
Yeah.
It's a source of wisdom, guidance, and inspiration, reminding us that we're not alone in our journeys.
It's about finding those echoes of the past in our present, those timeless truths that continue to speak to us across the millennia.
Yeah.
And Genesis is chock full of those truths. Now, I find the story of the Tower of Babel particularly fascinating.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful image, this attempt to reach heaven, to make a name for ourselves, to defy the limits of what's possible.
It's a story about ambition, about the desire for greatness. But it's also a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride and the consequences of overreaching. God's intervention, the confusion of languages, can be seen as a reminder that we're not meant to be all-powerful.
Right.
That diversity and difference are part of the divine plan.
It's like a cosmic reality check, reminding us that our efforts to control and dominate can often backfire. And it's interesting how the story explains the origin of different languages, suggesting that our differences, our inability to fully understand each other, are not necessarily a curse, but perhaps a blessing in disguise.
Precisely. It's a perspective that challenges us to embrace diversity,
Right.
to see it not as a barrier, but as an opportunity for growth and learning.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where everyone spoke the same language, thought the same thoughts, lived by the same rules.
Oh, wow.
It would be a much less vibrant, much less interesting place.
And potentially a much less innovative place.
Yeah.
Think about all the amazing things that have come from different cultures, interacting, sharing ideas, learning from each other. It's like that saying, the more we differ, the more we are alike.
I love that.
Yeah.
It speaks to the interconnectedness of humanity, the idea that even in our differences, we share a common thread, a common yearning for connection,
Right.
for meaning,
Yeah.
for purpose. And that, I think, is a beautiful reminder to carry with us as we continue to explore the world both within and beyond the pages of Genesis.
Beautifully said. Now, we've talked a lot about the big picture stuff, the overarching themes and lessons of Genesis, but I think it's also important to zoom in on some of the smaller details.
Yes.
Those little nuggets of wisdom that can sometimes get overlooked.
Absolutely. Sometimes the most profound insights are found in the seemingly insignificant.
For example, in chapter 2, when God is creating Eve, it says he caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam.
Oh.
I always found that detail intriguing. It's like this moment of vulnerability, of surrender, before something new and wondrous can be brought into being.
What a beautiful observation. It suggests that creation,
Yeah.
whether it's the creation of the universe or the creation of something new in our own lives,
Right.
often requires a letting go, a willingness to step aside and allow something greater to unfold.
And there's that line in chapter 4, after Cain kills Abel and God asks him where his brother is.
Yes,
Cain responds, "Am I my brother's keeper?"
right.
It's a question that's haunted humanity ever since.
It's a question that forces us to confront our responsibility to one another, to consider the consequences of our actions, and to choose compassion over indifference.
Right.
It's a reminder that we're not isolated individuals, but interconnected beings, and that our choices have ripple effects that extend far beyond ourselves.
It's about recognizing that shared humanity, that sense of interconnectedness that you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And then there's the rainbow in chapter 9, the symbol of God's covenant with Noah. What's interesting is that it's not just a one-way promise.
Right.
It's a reminder that God is also bound by the covenant, that there's a sense of mutual obligation, of trust and fidelity between the divine and humanity.
It's a beautiful concept, isn't it?
It is.
That even God, in all his power and glory, is willing to enter into a covenant with us, to make a promise, to offer a symbol of hope and reconciliation.
It speaks to the idea that we're not just passive recipients of God's grace, but active participants in the divine drama.
Yeah.
And that's an empowering thought, isn't it?
It is. It suggests that we have a role to play, a responsibility to uphold our end of the covenant, to live in a way that honors the promise of the rainbow.
Right.
And that, I think, is a powerful call to action for us today.
A call to be peacemakers, bridge builders, and caretakers of this incredible world we've been given. And to remember that even in the darkest of times, there's always the possibility of a new beginning, symbolized by that arc of color in the sky.
Beautifully said.
Oh.
But as you mentioned earlier, there's still so much more to explore in Genesis. Perhaps we should shift our focus to the stories of Abraham and his descendants.
Yeah.
After all, they play a pivotal role in the unfolding narrative of the Bible.
You read my mind. Abraham is often considered the father of faith, the patriarch from whom Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all trace their roots. His story is full of twists and turns, trials and triumphs. Are you ready to embark on this next leg of our journey?
Lead the way. I'm eager to see where the path leads us.
All right, deep divers, we're back and ready to jump into the next part of Genesis. We've gone from creation to the scattering of nations, and now we're going to meet a pivotal figure, Abram, later known as Abraham. He's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, he's not just a big deal. He's considered the patriarch of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. His story is really, it's a cornerstone of these traditions, and it's a wild ride.
So where do we find Abram in this vast narrative? We've just witnessed the Tower of Babel, with humanity scattered, languages diversified. What happens next?
We pick up in chapter 12, where God chooses Abram, living in Mesopotamia, to forge a special covenant with him. This isn't just a casual agreement.
Right.
It's a promise that will resonate throughout history.
A covenant that sounds pretty weighty. What exactly is God promising here?
God promises Abram land, descendants as numerous as the stars, and blessings that will extend to all nations. It's a mind-boggling offer.
Yeah.
But there's a catch, of course. Abram is asked to leave his homeland and journey to a land that God will show him.
Talk about a leap of faith.
Right.
Uprooting your whole life, leaving everything familiar behind based on a promise.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what was going through Abram's mind.
It's a test of faith, obedience, and trust in the unseen.
Yeah.
And this theme of faith, of trusting in God's plan, even when it seems impossible, becomes a defining characteristic of Abraham's story.
So he sets off on this journey.
He does.
But I'm guessing it's not all smooth sailing from here.
You guessed right. He faces famine, conflicts, even moments of doubt about whether God will keep his promise. Chapter 15 captures this beautifully.
Okay.
God tells Abram to look up at the stars and try to count them. That's how numerous his descendants will be, God assures him.
That image of a star-filled sky. It's breathtaking, a powerful symbol of potential.
Yeah.
But Abram's wife, Sarai, is getting older, and they still don't have any children. It seems like an impossible situation. Did they ever waver?
Their faith is tested, especially when Sarai, desperate for a child,
Right.
encourages Abram to have a child with her maidservant,
Right.
Hagar.
Yeah.
This leads to the birth of Ishmael, but it's not the fulfillment of God's promise.
So not quite the happy ending they were hoping for.
Years later, when Abram and Sarai are both very old,
Okay.
God reaffirms his covenant, telling them that Sarai will bear a son. It seems impossible, given their age,
Yeah.
but remarkably, Sarai, whose name is changed to Sarah,
Right.
conceives and gives birth to Isaac.
Now that's a story that would make even the most skeptical person raise an eyebrow. It speaks to the power of faith, but it also sets up a complex family dynamic, doesn't it? Two sons, one born through seemingly natural means, and another, Isaac, representing the fulfillment of God's covenant.
It's a tension that foreshadows a conflict that has resonated through history. But the focus remains on Isaac, the child of promise.
Yeah.
And this promise is put to the ultimate test in chapter 22, where God asks Abraham to sacrifice Isaac.
Wait, what? After all that waiting, all that hope, God asks him to sacrifice the son who represents the fulfillment of everything he's been promised. That's intense.
It's one of the most challenging passages in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's a test of faith, of obedience, of complete surrender to the divine will. But just as Abraham is about to carry out the sacrifice, an angel stops him,
Right.
providing a ram to take Isaac's place.
Talk about a last-minute reprieve. I can't even imagine what must have been going through Abraham's mind at that moment. But why would God even ask such a thing?
It's a question that has been debated for centuries. But the story highlights Abraham's unwavering trust in God, even when faced with the most unthinkable sacrifice.
Right.
It's this act of faith that cements his legacy as the father of faith.
We've seen faith, family dynamics, and obedience play out in Abraham's story. But how do these ancient events connect with us today? What can we learn from them in our modern world?
That's the power of these stories. They tap into timeless truths about the human experience. Abraham's journey reminds us that even when things seem impossible, even when faced with uncertainty and doubt,
Yeah.
there's strength in trusting in something larger than ourselves and having faith in a plan we may not fully understand.
And the complexities of family relationships,
Yeah.
the rivalries, the betrayals, those are timeless too. What can we glean from those dynamics in Abraham's story?
It highlights the importance of forgiveness, of reconciliation.
Yeah.
Relationships are messy, they're complicated.
Yeah.
But even when there's hurt and betrayal, there's always the possibility of finding a way forward,
Right.
of rebuilding broken bridges.
And then there's the theme of sacrifice. Most of us won't face a test like Abraham's.
Right.
But in what ways does this idea of sacrifice resonate in our modern lives?
Sacrifice is about letting go of something precious, something we hold dear for the sake of something greater. It might be sacrificing time, energy, or resources to help others.
Right.
Or sacrificing comfort and security to stand up for what we believe in. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest rewards come from letting go.
It's about stepping outside our comfort zones, taking risks, trusting that something good will come from it. It circles back to that idea of faith, doesn't it? Trusting in something beyond ourselves.
Absolutely. That theme runs through all of Genesis.
Yeah.
From creation to the covenant with Abraham.
It does.
We're part of something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
Our lives interconnected.
Yeah.
And even amidst the chaos and uncertainty, there's a divine order unfolding.
It's a beautiful and complex tapestry, each story adding to the richness of the whole. And as we conclude our deep dive into Genesis, it feels like the journey has just begun.
It does.
There's so much more to uncover, to contemplate, to learn from.
These stories are meant to be revisited, debated, pondered throughout our lives. Each time we return to them, we discover new layers of meaning, new ways they connect with our own experiences.
And that's the enduring power of Genesis. It's a book that continues to speak to us, challenge us, inspire us, even after all these centuries. Before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a quote that beautifully encapsulates the essence of what we've been exploring. It's from Genesis 12:2, where God says to Abram, "I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing."
It's a powerful statement. It's a promise of abundance, of legacy, but also a call to be a source of blessing to others. It speaks to the potential we all have to make a positive impact on the world around us.
It's a reminder that our lives can ripple outward, leaving a mark on the world, touching the lives of others in ways we may never fully comprehend. And with that thought, we conclude our deep dive into Genesis. May its stories continue to inspire you, challenge you, and guide you on your own unique journey.